What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me, as always, is Mr. Raman Singh. Raman, what's going on?
Not much, just building some retirement plans and running some analysis, all that geeky stuff.
Just
No
kicking,
complaints.
just solving people's financial problems. No big deal.
Just
Just
I
another day.
actually I just had a client who's actually retiring next month, and I built a full like a distribution strategy for him on how the money's gonna come out. And this guy's like an engineer, so he was just like, "Wow, like
Yeah.
this is a fascinating." I'm like, "Yeah, let's nerd out, bro. Let's
Yeah.
nerd let's nerd out."
It is like one of the most wonderful things that you can give clients.
Yeah.
It's like it is when you don't know anything about retirement and like who knows time value of money as a regular person walking around. Like
Right.
obviously we're in this world, we sit in here all day, so it's very common practice for us. But like if you don't understand how that works, it's like, man, I'm just gonna save as much money as I possibly can and cross my fingers and hope it's enough.
Yeah.
It's like such a relief, like what a gift it is to give to people. So it's a bigger deal than what we're making of it.
It is it we're solving people's, the biggest questions that keeps them up at night. And and then having that confidence that allows us to deliver what they want to see. It truly it that's what makes our job so exciting at the end of the day,
And rewarding.
and rewarding. Yeah, 100%.
So
Speaking
what
of time value of money,
Yeah, he's took the words out of my mouth. Speaking of TVM, so we are not too far away from the July exam, where I think we're right now we're kind of about 5 weeks out by the time this video releases. And if you're sitting here as a CFP student and you've started studying, I think at this point everybody realizes the value or how important time value of money is for this exam. It rears its head in education planning. So you get to see it in general principles. Then you see it in retirement planning in a couple of different ways that they'll test in, not just the one calculation. You see it obviously in investments, right? When you're calculating the value of bonds and stocks and DDMs and things of that nature. You see it come up in estate in sometimes in some shape or form.
yeah, of
And obviously in tax. Of course, we see things in
course.
tax.
Mhm.
So here's one topic that even though it's listed inside of general principles, it really touches multiple pieces of the exam. What do you think is the biggest mistake that CFP students make when it comes to time value of money?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about maybe some of your strategy for how to address those big mistakes.
Yeah, no, great question, Joe. It's so funny. I believe we were just talking about that not too long ago. And what we notice is a lot of students, they try to memorize keystrokes on the calculator. And
I
and when
agree with that.
you ask them, okay, so begin mode or end mode? Begin mode. Okay, but why? I don't know. It sounds like it's begin mode. Like, okay, like think about it. Like, why would we be using an end mode in this case? Why
Yeah.
would we be using a begin mode in this case? And I feel like th- understanding the why behind these questions will allow us to simplify time value of money questions, you know, at a whole different level. So I'd love for throw this back your way, Joe. And I know you do a fantastic job about explaining the concept of time value of money and kind of create like a visual aid. I'd love for you to share, with the audience that concept.
Yeah, and happy to do it. And I agree with memorizing keystrokes will get you questions right half the time. As long as you're
If you're lucky.
as long as the way that you're memorized it is the way that they're testing it, you're going to be like, this is great. I learned this in my education. And if you're using an HP calculator, you're going to go like, okay, I got to fit this into the box of present value, future value, I, Y, PMT, N, and mode. And, and like you said, if you're not actually understanding why those keystrokes are the keystrokes, you're going to have a really hard time with this exam.
Absolutely.
Because if I'm a CFP test writer and chatting with other CFP test writers, we're all aware of how people prepare for this exam. We're not unaware of how people prepare for the exam. So if you're writing a question and everybody goes immediately into begin mode on step 3 of the retirement calculation, really easy to change up one little thing and throw you into a panic.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I always like to teach is the timeline method. And it is a way for you to visualize how money works.
Mm.
And I always ask this question to anybody. I'm like, what is time value of money? And most people look at me and they go, I've actually never been asked that question. And when you sit there and you think about it, and if you just kind of take one step back and think about what time value of money is, it's the role of interest in the growth of money. And so when I step back and I think about it this way, I was like, oh, okay. Now that I understand that this is really trying to understand how interest plays a role,
Mm.
now I can start to kind of visualize the process. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to throw up a whiteboard. And I like and I'll give you an example of one of these kind of how I visualize this via the timeline. And just so everybody gets a sense of this. So, if we were to take something just as simple as an annuity, right? So if I said to you,
Mhm.
John is investing $10,000 a year, he's investing it at 6%. What is the value of that at year 10?
Mm.
10 years, right? And you're sitting there going, uh oh, when I see annuity, I do this in present value, or
Mhm.
I've never done a future value. So the way that I like to visualize it is this. I draw always a timeline with two ends like this.
Mhm.
And I always label it as time period 0 because this is now.
Mhm.
And then in this case, because it's 10 years, we're going to put 10 here. And I want to emphasize that this is the number of periods, of
Mm.
compounding periods, to be more specific,
Yeah.
that we have. And if this is compounded annually, then we have 10 compounding periods. And if it's compounded semi-annual, we have 20 compounding periods. So
Mhm.
now I know kind of where my time is right off the top because my timeline is showing me that there's 10 periods. I always like to draw hash marks in the middle, and that way I know exactly what's going on in the middle of my timeline. So if this is period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can go all the way to 10. And anytime that I have a payment, we're typically putting it under one of these,
Mhm.
right? And in this case, if I'm investing 10,000 a year, this is what it will look like. So now I can see that what I'm putting into my calculator is actually a representation of the timeline, not the other way around.
Right.
Anytime there's something in between, we know this is our payments.
Yep.
This is our N. This is our PV. This is
Mhm.
our FV. And now I can always figure out what's going on and I have something visual anytime I get stuck.
Yep.
And even when we do things that are advanced as a retirement calculation or an education calculation, it still fits within this timeline structure of what is the cost of college now as opposed to the cost of college in the future. What is the I? And so now we know that when what's happening in between here is our I. This is the growth. This is what's happening in between the periods. And so if my I here is 6%, I know that this 10,000 grows by 10%. Then another one is going in. Then it's growing by 6%. Then another one is going in. And so now every element that goes in my calculator is represented on my timeline.
Mm.
This is just a reminder for anybody who's learning TVM. If you're not doing it and visualizing, you're doing yourself a really grave disservice. You need
Right.
to get in there and figure out and get your hands dirty with this and figure out how the money's actually growing.
And I like how you've illustrated this, Joe, because the thing is, it allows the person who's studying time value of money truly understand, okay, I'm putting in $10,000 every year, but I also have to understand the fact that this $10,000 that's getting contributed is also growing every single year on that compounded growth, on just growth over growth over growth,
course.
while I keep adding more $10,000 per year every single year on top of that.
Correct, exactly. And that's the whole point of this is that visually see what's going on because now I understand, oh, remember, this is the role of interest on the investment. Well, why don't we have interest at the beginning? Well, there's nothing here. But if
Mm.
I made my $10,000 payment, my first one here, aka your begin mode,
Oh,
now we're starting to generate interest right away. And now you have a true visual representation of what's going on in your calculator. Remember, your
and
calculator just does it really fast.
right. And then this is exactly where you said the exam writers, they know that the students are just memorizing keystrokes, so they could easily say that John is saving $10,000 per year at the beginning of every year. And if you just and they don't just write it as crystal clear as what I just said, but they could make a very subtle hint about it, and then you have to say, "Uh-oh, wait a second. Is this really going to be in end mode, or are we changing it to begin mode at that point?"
That's exactly right. And if again, if I'm a test writer, which I am not, but I knowing how people are studying, knowing that they're memorizing keystrokes, or just I have to find a way to figure out how to fit this into my calculator. Cool, and you'll get some questions right, but anytime that the wording changes, you're going to have no idea what's going on. And I
Right.
think anybody who's ever answered a TVM question, you get one right, one wrong, one right, one wrong, and you're sitting there guessing what your inputs are. And again, you're going to get lucky at points. But if you want consistency in the answers, you have to understand the underlying parts of what's going on and realizing that your calculator is just making this really, really fast and easy. But that doesn't change the fact that you got to know what's going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then to your point, if the calculator is making it fast and easy, then you're not really truly understanding what steps you need to be taking because you're just overlooking those steps at that
Yeah,
point.
exactly. I mean, it's like, you know, what my first year that I had a job, I did my taxes on, was it, what was that tax software that Intuit had? Do they still
TurboTax?
TurboTax? Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
And I remember, and I'm just punching in numbers. I'm like, it's easy to do your taxes. Who needs an accountant? Right. And then I was like, oh my God, it says I owe money and I've made literally 18 cents this year. So how do I owe money? And I completely screwed up a deduction because I really
Yeah.
didn't understand deductions. But just because I can use TurboTax doesn't make me a tax pro. And that's a lot of us, the way that we kind of treat the calculator is I can punch in a bunch of numbers and get an output. But again, what are you going to do when it comes to amortization questions or MPVs or IRRs
Mhm.
where, okay, now it's not this nice, neat in a box. You invest 10,000 today and it grows at 5% in 10 years. What is it worth? If we let's hope for a lot of those questions, right?
Yeah, of course.
But when it comes down to it, I don't think CFP is as generous as to give us such beautiful, easy, light questions.
I love those cash flow questions where they'll start off with the cash flow, then it'll say it's not, or there's like skipped cash flow in certain years, and then you add back cash flows. It's kind of like, wait a second, what am I doing here? Like I got money coming in, money going out. Like it freezes the students because
Yeah.
they're too focused on punching in the keystrokes rather than understanding, like, okay, this year the money came in. Next year I actually took a distribution or whatever that is.
Right.
And once you start understanding it, then calculator basically becomes a secondary thing where you're leading the calculator on what you want it to calculate for you at that point.
Right, right. And I couldn't agree more because I was actually working on a problem with a student today that is taking the exam in November, but working on some fundamentals. And the exercise that he had for this week as part of his fundamentals exercise was just time value money that varied in both the degree of difficulty and what you had to do. And one of them I was a client invested in a real estate property and the instead of giving the student the cash flow from the problem, you had to calculate it. So you had to
Mm.
take out expenses, figure out what that was. And the final cash flow was he had to figure out the sale price based on a cap rate.
Oh my God.
So, a high level time value
Right,
money
right, right, right.
calculation. But and he put it on his pager and he was like cash flow one, cash flow two, cash flow three, cash flow four, and it was beautifully set up, but he had no idea what to enter in there.
Mm,
And I feel like that's all of us. We're very good. Okay, what's PV? What's FV? What's I? What's Y? What's PMT? What's N? What mode are we in? And any of us can write that out. Good for you. But I can jostle it any way that I want as a CFP test writer.
right.
And if you don't understand it, I'm going to shake you down really quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So make sure that you understand that. And if you don't understand that by visualization, come to Raman, come to myself. This is what we are here for. We are here to help and assist you with this. So, as always, everybody, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you guys on our next episode.